Well, okay, I think I'll start because I have so many questions. I'm hopeful that we'll get to all and answer your questions, but let's go. Today we have Eva Reistad and Jessica Rose Weiss joining us. They're two incredible power duo. You can read more about them in our MailChimp or on their websites, but I'm just gonna go and get started. So, how did you both meet?
We met, I I had a studio in Atwater?
In Highland Park,
Highland
East
Park,
LA.
East LA, in a place called King Size Sound Labs, and Eva was also working there. So what were you, studio manager? She was studio manager, and I just had a writing room there with a friend of ours, and yeah, she just we just became mates. But that was God, that was in 2013, probably.
Yeah, long time ago.
13, and then so our paths had crossed that way, but then we kind of separated. You moved off to a different place, studio to work, and I moved off to another studio place. And then we reconnected.
Yeah, we reconnected in London.
Yeah, in London. I was there for a project that I wrote some music for, this play that was put up at the Globe there in London, and Eva was working on Bond with the Zimmer team, where she stems from. So yeah, we reconnected, and I was working on a piece of music, and I needed someone to mix it. So she became my willing victim and said, okay, bring it on over. So
yeah, we just mixed it one day after brunch, and it was really funny because we were like, this is actually like really fun. We're like, we should work together more. And then she segued into becoming pretty successful, and I started mixing on my own different scores and stuff. So then we kind of just like re-met up and started working together.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. And I love that Bond is a part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think I always I'm loyal, and I always knew that I wanted to find someone that I could kind of work with and take with me, and vice versa. And so I was just so thrilled that it was someone that I'd known for such a long time, and who's just such a badass, and she's so amazing at what she does. And we both stem from the remote control camp, so we speak a similar language. So it was kind of just a match made in heaven, really.
Wow, I also interned there. So as the moderator, I'm also coming from that camp, kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
Awesome.
A lot of people kind of go through those doors, and some stay longer than others, but yeah, it's a great.
For sure. Yeah. Okay, so my other question, this one is for Jess, actually. Given that the director is already like approve your demos, what value do you see in having a mixer? And do you only engage Eva when you record a live orchestra, or do you also bring her in for your projects that are just purely MIDI?
I bring her in on everything, whether it's MIDI, orchestra, both. I do a lot of hybrid writing, so that gets complex in itself because you're trying to manage orchestra and all the rest of the arrangement, synths and guitars and drums and that kind of thing. So it's invaluable, really. I think you always need an extra set of ears to hear the things that you're not hearing. And you become so familiarized and attached to your own material that at some stage you need to take a step back and let someone in, and let somebody kind of assess what is happening sonically. And we'll probably get to this a little later too, but I write in stereo, and so most of the things that I deliver are delivered in 5/1. So having Eva there to actually sort that out with me too is a requirement. Like, I need somebody like her to be able to know where everything should sit and place things. And yeah, so I think the demo has to sell the idea, but then I feel like the goal is always, the cherry on top is when you actually get to mix the final product, and you take it to the next level. Because we sit in our studios all day long, and for anyone that's been on a dub stage, the way that things translate onto a dub is very different. And it can be shocking if you're unfamiliar with that part of the process. So it's really important to have a mixer who's engaging with you and who knows what that feels like sonically. So yeah.
Got it.
long-winded.
Well, glad to hear that you work together on everything.
Yeah, we do.
Literally.
Um,
Yeah.
and Eva, my next question is for you. You're also very musical, so does that ever play into your decision making? Like, do you change mixing styles based on the composer you're working with and the style that they're writing in? How is it for you?
Yeah, each different project, especially like Jess's, but especially composer to composer, all the writing is very different. Sonically, what I get is very different. So yeah, I mean, being musical also helps. It helps with like orchestral kind of automation. We do a lot of automation, basically. So that definitely helps, especially when I'm given, certain composers you're allowed to like really stray from the demo. Like she's kind of an example. Sometimes it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna give you this, but like you know what to do. And so being musical is really kind of benefits that because I kind of have to go, okay, what would I do? Would I push up the short synths if it's action? Would I push up the long synths if it's not action, and just getting certain things to pop here and there. So some composers are very much, it's demo mix. We have to get it as close as possible. It's like she was saying, the demo sold the idea to the director. So it's not like straying really from the demo. I'm not like adding delays and crazy stuff unless we're going into surround. And sometimes we kind of, we get crazy that way musically, which also, yes, kind of depends composer to composer. And for her, it's definitely project to project because some things are a lot more action or like video gamey. And then things that are more orchestral, we definitely treat very differently as well.
Got it. And can you explain a little bit more the automation that you're adding? Is it to highlight the dynamic range or is it to, I don't know, like minimize problems in the recording or just give us a
All
bit
of
more
the
detail?
above.
I mean, yeah, literally all of the above.
Yeah.
We automate. With orchestras, you automate entrances. Sometimes they do a great job at sweeping, but depending on where it's recorded, sometimes we help them out a little bit. Kind of depends on the studio it was recorded in, or how the players are playing. We also do automation for dialogue sometimes because we don't the dialogue we don't ever really want to like step on its toes. So sometimes we either have to like push the music up when there's a lot of action, or we kind of pull it down in those like gentler moments, like pianos, for example, or something that always sticks out. So me and her are sometimes like just like down this rabbit hole of like push the piano up 1 dB, push the piano down 1 dB, just like write it down when they start talking, write it up, and it can be like a very long, extensive process. So yeah, we mold around players and we also mold around basically dialogue or what picture is doing at the moment. At the end of the movie, we're like, push it up. It's the end of the movie. It's the last scene. Like they're walking out. So we do a lot of automation actually, depending on the score, depending on what's actually happening in the film.
Got
Yeah,
it.
I
So
mean, to your point as well, I was going to say that's such I learned that pretty early on, but ideally, in my opinion, you want to deliver to the dub stage like the best possible mix because given the time constraints of everything, let's say the mixer only has time to put the faders to 0, then if you've spent all this time with your mixer really automating and making it yeah, as you said, making it not only musical, but making sure that the moments that you want to be highlighted are actually doing that, and being aware of the effects, the sound effects track, because that's the thing that composers for the rest of time are going to be fighting, or we're going to be up against the sound effects. So I think the more mixing you can do before you get to the dub, the better, because ideally it's like those mixers can just put the faders to unity gain and the mix sounds kind of impeccable because you've done all that automating beforehand. So yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
brilliant. And you mix while you're both in the same room, or Eva does like a first pass and then you come into picture for kind of changing it?
I mean, you do a first pass.
Yeah, I do a first pass. I usually get a number of cues done, maybe 5, 6. She'll come in, usually give a directive, whether I've gone in the right way or the wrong way. Sometimes it's the wrong way. And then it's, from there, because yeah, I generally like to do that. We like to do that because it's like, you can go a wrong way, basically, especially with someone like her and people who are like kind of trusting you to kind of maybe stray from balances of the reference, from whatever, because sometimes people are like, it's 90% there, but certain things need tweaking. So in that sense, it's always good to come in and then I can kind of go off on my own, and then she'll come back in again. And so yeah, we do playbacks throughout the mix.
Got it. And just when you're in the writing process, like how much of thought you put into mixing already? Are you already thinking of these like surround environments? Do you have ideas on what needs to pop, like how something should be EQ'd? Just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think I'm mixing as I'm writing. I just think that's like an inherent part of how I compose in a sense. And yeah, I do get specific. I feel like when I come into the studio at the end of the process, like I have specific ideas, choirs and surrounds, and hey, I have this synth patch, like can you throw it around the room? You know, I like to get detailed about those things because I think that's what make the mixes sound interesting, you know, and not flat. So I spend a lot of time you know, even EQing sounds and pushing and pulling sounds. And yeah, I like to get into the detail of it because I'm interested in it too, you know, like I certainly I don't like to pull up a patch and just use it and not play with it and mold it and shape it and turn it into something unique and different. So yeah, I'm always thinking about that. And I'm always hitting up Eva and asking her like, what's a good plugin for this? And what's the better plugin for this? And why do these strings sound so tinny? What should I use? What's gold floss? You know, like I'm always yeah, leaning on Eva to kind of help me even through that process of writing when I'm trying to get something to sound a specific way. So
Got it.
yeah.
Wow. And you two have been like collaborating for so long that you must know each other super well creatively. So like for different movies, do your directions to Eva change, or is it pretty much the same process every single time?
No, I mean, it's just dependent on the project. You know, if it's a synth heavy project, we're gonna go one direction, and I'm gonna hopefully give her some insight as to what to focus on. Like here are, you know, even simple things like, hey, the director loves this sound, so feel free to push that sound up, you know, like make it a little bit aggressive. And then when we're working on orchestra, yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time with reverbs and deciding like how big, how small, what is the sound of the, you know, what does the room sound like? What did the hall sound like? Do we like it? How are we going to attenuate certain frequencies that aren't flattering? So yeah, I mean, every project is different, but we do, because we know each other so well and we've been working together so long, I think we have such a shorthand. You know, we kind of read each other's minds in a way. Like we'll play something back, and as we're listening, she'll go, I know.
Yeah.
You know, and that's because she does, because she knows I'm going to be like, why did the woodwind sound like that? You know, so yeah, it's every project's different, but you know, we use our tools.
We use the same language
Yeah, the
for
same
every
language,
project.
exactly,
It's like
yeah.
every movie is very different. For example, Cinderella was very bright, you know, and that's an obvious directive because it's a pop movie and there's pop songs happening, and it's like we have to compete with that. And then for something like we did Minions, which was like a full orchestra, it was like brass, strings at the same time, and it was like, all right, this needs to be more like Abbey Road classic orchestra, like, you know, a bit of a warmer sound. And that's just like, that's also instinct, like as an instinct, when you hear the orchestra playing, it just falls to that, you know.
Yeah.
So it kind of, the actual writing of the music always kind of, you know, for us indicates as well how it's going to get mixed. So we have some conversation, but yeah, it's usually like, all right, I kind of get it from the get-go. And if I don't, we talk about it, and it's a pretty quick process in that sense.
Got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so
we like to experiment. I was just going to say, we do like to, you know, I think she's very generous with her time with me, because I think oftentimes you do mix where you do mixes where composers send you the material, you do a pass, they send her notes via email, she does another pass, and then approval, right?
Yeah.
which I certainly could trust her any day to do, but I think we really like collaborating and like making things unique and spending time really nerding out and enjoying the process of, you know, okay, do we like this sound? Maybe it should be darker because there's already a synth doing that. Like, how can we maybe push the mids here. So we spend so much detailed time just, you know, focused on how to kind of make every score unique and interesting, you know.
That's awesome. And so what's the technical process when beginning a mix? Can you walk us through?
Yeah, I mean, I send her all the stems, individual stems in a stereo mix and a click track and a MIDI file, and a cue sheet. So she knows there's 80 cues or 12. And yeah, and then you kind of go into prep mode.
Yeah, we you know, if there's a music editor, we'll kind of figure out, we usually start with a conversation with the music editor. And then we'll talk to, you know, sometimes we'll talk to the dub, but the music editor is usually talking to the dub stage going, how many stems do you need? Depends on how much editing the movie may need, the music, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of figure that out. I'll build a template. She'll send me everything. My assistant will prep everything, make sure everything's good. If we get orchestra, it gets sent, we pop it in, and then we start mixing, and then, you know, get everything approved. Then we print stems, send it off to the dub, and, you know, they're off to the races with everything. So.
And, you know, the orchestra side of things is always time consuming because we go through all of the takes. So, you know, I let, you know, there's take notes are being done during the process of recording the orchestra. So we refer to them for the best option, but we oftentimes do go back in and we're like, hey, this section from this measure to this measure doesn't feel like it's singing the right way. Should we go back in and see what other takes we have? So that's certainly a large
technical part of the process.
Yeah.
Got it. And as for the stems that you delivered to Eva, like, how do you have them? I'm assuming they end up being dry, but when you separate the instrument families, do you just go low versus high, or like short versus long? I know people have different preferences. What is it in your case?
Yeah, I mean, I bug the crap out of her because I give her a lot of stems. I do highs and lows and shorts and longs and all of that, but I also give her, we have what we call extra, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And extra just really means that I'm isolating these sounds for a reason and I want to play with them in the mix. So my stems, you know, it's again dependent on project, but sometimes I send dry, sometimes I do send wet if it's a synth or if it's something that has a specific reverb that's unique to the sound itself. Then Eva prefers that I send it with the verb attached.
Yeah, you know, the reverb's interesting. It's like, it really depends on the project for that. But the thing is like reverbs, like we have to move so quick, you know, in a mix. It's like sometimes we have a week and sometimes things are getting approved like 4 days before the dub, you know, and in that case, it's like we're describing the technical process, like printing a whole cue takes a minute, me getting the cue takes a minute, it getting prepped for me to mix takes a minute, and by a minute I mean like, you know, hours sometimes. So it's like oftentimes I'll say leave the reverbs on for like short things. I'll say usually take it off a little bit. A lot of composers sometimes put longer reverbs on short things, which I tend to say don't do that because it kind of muddies up things, because if a reverb is extended out past a short hit, now we're getting into muddy territory. But generally, because that sound that they've done is so married to the demo, if they were to take off all the reverbs, I would be searching and trying to recreate, you know, the volume and width they created in their mix with the reverbs. So I try not to put too much of a hat on a hat, because I do use reverbs to make things surround, and I do use like delays as well sometimes, well, a lot of times, to make things surround. So that being said, though, my reverbs are always a little bit different than theirs, so it's not too much of a problem. But yeah, so reverbs actually typically, yes, on, but sometimes we do go back and it's like, because sometimes I get you know, it happens a lot with pianos. Pianos you'll get from a composer and they'll always go, do you want it wet or dry? And now in my career, I'm like, give me both, because it's like, I'll get a dry and I'll go, I'm going to add my reverb, and they'll go, oh, it's too big. It's too small. Like, it doesn't quite make sense, because people are like really married to their freaking pianos, and pianos are usually playing in some like super important part. It's always like some emotional. So it's like you don't want to drown out the scene with a huge like reverberant piano. So that's always a really interesting conversation. So pianos, I usually get both wet and dry. Everything other than that, usually I, let's say, leave the effects on.
Although
Wow,
sometimes like drums for minions, there's one cue, it's like the one action cue, and there's drums at the end of it, like really tight sounding. Yeah, like tight sounding. They're cool. They're like kind of electro sounding drums almost. I don't know, like a hybrid of something. And I remember like we spent so much time on the snare sound. And just because it was so specific, I wanted this like thwack, and I wanted the reverb to have that kind of like ring to it. And so, yeah, I mean, that's, I think with drums with you as well, I kind of lean on your verbs.
Right.
Yeah. And live orchestra. It always comes down to your reverbs as well. It's not like I, have anything to do with that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Sample orchestra sometimes is good. Not reverbs. I'll get wet and dry sometimes for that too, because it's like I will add my own for using samples to back up the lives. It's nice to use the same reverb sometimes for both. I'll just put the samples out my live orchestra bus, so they're all getting treated the same. So yeah.
Got it. Very cool. And what's your favorite part about the general mixing process?
Finishing. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No.
Delivery day.
Delivery day. No, I mean, to me, it's like when we're in the groove, when we're really in the groove, when everything is like working, and I always like, I get excited when I'm going in and I know we're going to like play back some really big cues. Like if it's in reel 6, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a fun day, because these cues have to just like, be the thing. So yeah, I think, that's my feeling, is like once we've figured out all of the technical aspects of it, once the reverbs are set and, we know where we're going and we've figured out the sound, then it's just exciting. Like those last final days are really exciting. And we sit back and we like,
it's like approved. Yeah, great. We got it.
High-five each other at that point, because like the first couple of days are strenuous. They're difficult because you're just trying to figure it out. And, we've worked on so many different kinds of projects together, whether it's like big studio movies or like very independent films. So they all come with their challenges, but time management is certainly a really big thing when you have, when you have independent projects that need everything in 4 days, versus like a Cinderella where we had several weeks to mix that. So,
yeah, locking it in, like once we get locked in, it's really fun, because at first it's like, okay, I'll play a mix, and she'll gonna be like, okay, let's kind of get into this, and it's like, okay, cool. And that's when, like, when I'm say using like your musical ear to be listening to what I think should be louder, is sometimes like, oh, actually it's this sound that the director liked. It's not that sound. They actually didn't really like that sound, so that's not the one we're going to be pushing up. And I'm like, okay, well, that's how it is on the next 6 mixes. So just give me a minute. Or she'll go, okay, I'm going to come back tomorrow then. I'm like, great. And then I'll go back and do it. So yeah, getting like really locked in is super fun, because into like reel 3, maybe 4, if there's 6 reels, about halfway in, it really starts making sense. And even the big cues end up being actually really easy to mix, because you understand the energy, you understand what thing. Yeah, we understand where we're going. We get like the narrative and the direction of everything. So once we start like sitting back, it's like, she's like, nice. Oh, nice. It's like, okay, cool. And then
like once Eva knows that I don't need to sit in the mixed position anymore, and I'm back on the couch, she knows like we're in a good place. We're in a really good place, because for those first couple of days, I like sit in the, in the prime position, and I like have my ears forward, and I'm like, which one's mute? Which one's my demo?
Yeah, it's
which
like,
one's my demo? Which one is, and so we do a lot of that at the beginning. But
yeah, and I would say the last cue of the movie is also nice, but that definitely depends on the project too. Because sometimes we're like yes, and sometimes it's just like, all right.
And then
that was all right.
and of course, like a really important part of the process, which kind of sucks when you're mixing, when you're first mixing together, like you're really so specific and you're so intentional in regards to what you want it to sound like, and what needs to pop, and the dynamics of things and all the intricacies of it. And then after you've gotten that right and you're like, okay, this is sweet, it's in the sweet spot, then you have to turn to your mixer and go, okay, let's put the dialogue and see if this works. Let's put the dialogue on and see if it really is going to work, you know? I mean, and we also mix, and you also mix with the dialogue on, but I think like at the beginning stages, like we're just trying to figure out, yeah, like our sonic palette really. So that's another stage of the process where it's all good and well if it sounds brilliant, but if it kind of is rubbing against the dialogue, then you're in.
That's the not fun stage.
Yeah, that's the not fun
when
stage.
you add dialogue back.
Yes.
In, you're like, okay. Rewind.
Yeah.
Well, I was about to ask you what's the most challenging part of the process, other than getting the piano reverb right and nailing the first few cues.
Yeah, I feel like I've mentioned all of them already.
Good, so I guess we'll skip. Okay, so my next question is about the soundtrack album. Like, who picks what goes in? Is it Jess picking, mostly like thinking about it compositionally and picking her favorite cues, or is it what you decide sounds best at the end of the day with all the recordings, etc.? What that process looks like?
Yeah, both. I mean, you kind of nailed it. You know, if I can, I like to go in cue order, but it doesn't really matter, I suppose. I'd say more often than not, I do that. And sometimes I pull a couple cues out that I'm like, okay, these are kind of like, you know, 30-second stingers. We don't really need them in there. But yeah, I want any listener to kind of have the experience of taking the narrative journey. So so I'd like to keep it in like cue order if possible. But you know, she and I have a really fun time naming all of the cues. I mean, sometimes I do it beforehand with, you know, with the music editor, but at the end of the day, it really is my decision. So I always bring Eva in to be clever with me, and that's also part of like a fun part of the process at the very end, because we know we're really at the end at that stage. So yeah.
Awesome. And what is your favorite thing about collaborating with a close friend?
I would, well, it's the one answer we pause on.
I don't know.
What was that?
I'll take the lead on this one.
Mm.
No, you know what, I'll say that, it's, you know, roles in the music industry are very interesting. Expectations for how you're supposed to act as roles in the industry are also very, have been solidified differently over the years. You know, an engineer, it really, the relationship always really depends on who you're working with. So certain clients, my input is definitely not welcome, which is fine with me, because historically my job has been to do one thing, which is to make it sound better. It's not really my job to, you know, do anything other than that. So it's very, and also as an engineer, it's always our job to kind of like stay cool and collected, which a lot of times I have to be, but I also sort of have a, sort of unique personality, I would say, for an engineer. A lot of people would say I'm like definitely a bit more outgoing. I'm like a little bit far out on the spectrum as far as how you're supposed to behave in the role. Doesn't mean I'm not professional, but working with somebody that you're really close friends with is really fun, because you get to kind of like be a little weird. You get to like be a little like what, you know, kind of wacky, and we can kind of, you know, we kind of have this relationship where it's like if one of us is frustrated, you can actually kind of display it, where in a lot of situations if I'm frustrated, it's very much keep calm, because I want to keep the other person calm, and I think it's vice versa. So it's like when we work together, like sometimes she's like, oh, I'm so mad right now, and I'm like, okay. She's like, I'm not mad at you, I'm just mad at the situation, and I'm like, okay, got it. And at the same time, it's like we can work together. And in my old house, I had a studio and I had like a little pool out back, and at like 4 p.m. we'd be like, all right, it's pool time, and we would like go out in the sun and just kind of like chill like in between. And then we'd be like, all right, let's get back to mixing. So it's like, you know, having a relationship like that can just make the whole process like so much more fun and so much more enjoyable. Also, she's very, you know, she's very professional and very like, you know, we're both very professional while also being like complete nut jobs, which is very fun in the end, you know. And we're not we're not crazy in the way that can be really like anal OCD. I mean, we can be, but not all the time. So it's like we get like breaths of fresh air, and we can also just kind of collaborate in this way where sometimes it's easy, but when it's hard, we can kind of like get through it together.
Support each other.
Yeah, and not get frustrated at each other. Like we never really get mad at each other. It's not like, wow, well, you gave me this wrong, or well, you're just sounds bad. It's like never like that. It's always like, well, let's we have a very open dialogue about like, okay, what can we work on together versus me just getting things from composers and being like, this is whack, like, but I must do my job here and just send it through better. You know, we have a great dialogue in that regard.
It's like being in a band, you know, like if any of you have ever been in bands, like that's how it feels. It's like, you know, we're like Paul and John basically, or choose your choose your favorite band. But that's what it's like. And but at the end of the day, the trust is what is like so invaluable. It's just like I truly, if for whatever reason I was unavailable and I couldn't like finish mixing with her, I would have full faith that she could deliver the rest of it to the stage, even without my listening to it. And I know that it would be fantastic. We just have that respect and understanding with each other at this stage. So, I mean, that's priceless. It's just like, you know, that's a dream, because this, you know, this business is really difficult. It's really hard. There are a lot of challenges along the way. And so honestly, like mixing is truly one of my favorite parts, like recording orchestra, recording any players, recording and mixing. It's really my favorite part. Writing is horrible. I hate writing. I mean, I like writing once I get into the groove of it, but the beginning stages of writing anything is just like, oof. But yeah, I think if you're lucky to have, you know, a collaborator the way we have each other, it's such a gift, because, you know, and as you said, like this is kind of not so much anymore, thank goodness, but it's been a man's world for a very long time. Not that we need to get into that conversation too deeply, but it's really nice to just see representation like across the board, from composers to mixers and editors and everywhere. And it's just, you know, it's really refreshing, and it makes you feel like you're meant to be where you are, you know. So
Right. And like how you said, like, oh, we're like John and Paul. No. The future is like we're like Jess and Eva.
yeah. We're like Lisa and
Wendy and Lisa.
Wendy and Lisa. There you go. We're like Wendy and Lisa.
Right. That is true. And is there like a difficult part about being close friends at all? I mean, it sounds like a dream, so you can simply say no and we can switch to the next question, but thought I'd ask.
I mean, no, I think
Getting distracted, that would be it.
getting distracted, yeah,
Sometimes.
for sure.
Sometimes we want to cut out early, like we just want to go hang out. Like, should we go
Get a
want to get
margarita.
dinner, or want to go to happy hour? I mean, yeah, we work for 2 hours, so it sounds like, yeah, sure, why not? So I would say that's the only thing, but that's literally the only thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for me, like I've had to learn over the years, and it's just like I know everything will always get done, so I've learned how to let go of that. But you know, I think for me at the beginning it was hard, maybe because we're so close, in the sense that sometimes I'd be like, but do we have enough time? I would always be nervous about time, like, are you available? Hey, are you available? Can we do it now? And I learned how to like exhale from project to project, and I'm like, she's got it, we've got it. If we had to do this in an hour, we could do it. So
yeah, we used to do like 12-13 hour playbacks, and now we're so smart. We're like, come over for like literally like 3 hours. Yeah. Because we also know now that our ears, I have a bigger studio now. I have huge speakers, and we're working on huge cues. We're like, I'm saying, like, you're asked what the downside is, but you know, whatever. we learned over the years, you know, that was a downside probably in the beginning, is that we were just a bit new to that process. So we were like, yeah, well, we need to get 13 cues done in a day. And now we're like, let's do 5, you know, over the course of a week, you know, 5 times 7 is how many, you know, it's like we know we can get everything done, and we can also take our time and just like not be so like, we like to work normal hours now. You know, she's got a husband and a baby, and you know, I like to make dinner at home. So
yeah, that is awesome. Well, Jess, I have a question for you. When we were talking about mixing, we said that like things start getting more natural by reel 4 almost. What is it for you in writing? Because I feel like for me, writing is the same. Like the first few cues, it's hell until you figure out what your director wants. Is it the same
Yes.
for you, or do you have
Absolutely.
magical powers and it comes to you in real one?
If I had magical powers, I would gift them amongst all of my composer friends. No, I certainly don't have magical powers. I'm the same as you. I think by reel 4 for sure. Like you just, you know, if it's working. And for me, I'm always kind of like, I don't know. I constantly struggle with like, where do I start? You know, I always, once I get a project, I watch it and then I step away and I like sit at my piano, my keyboard, guitar, whatever, and I write without looking at picture, just to kind of like flex my muscles. And then for me, the struggle is like, okay, well, what reel do I start in? You know, sometimes I'm like, shit, should I just start at the beginning? Because like, what a wonderful place to start. Or should I start somewhere in reel 4 or 5 where it's juicy and like I can really figure out if like thematically my ideas are working and if they'll come to fruition or not. So, you know, I think again, sorry to be boring, but that's specific. It's based on any project, you know. The most recent film that we worked on, it was cool. I demoed for it and I got it, and I demoed the opening scene. I demoed like a 5-minute opening sequence, almost like not a montage, but it went through a lot. It had different layers to it. It was like, you know, they're on the phone, a romantic call, and then she like jumps off a building. It's an action movie, and then she kicks a lot of ass. So there's all these different tonal things happening musically, etc. And so because I demoed that and I got the gig, that's where I started. And and I was like, okay, I know this is working. Well, flash forward to the end of it, like a lot of that didn't end up working and it unraveled, which again is just part of the process. So I knew, and what happens similarly to what you were saying is like in later reels, I got more, approvals were happening and the director was liking it, but it's such a tricky job because you're also trying to understand the temperament of who you're working with. And the more they hear, the more they get comfortable with. So what are you going to present first? And, you know, the thing that got me the job ended up changing significantly by the end of it. So yeah, it's a roller coaster. It's definitely a roller coaster. But I think those end reels, that's where you like build confidence and you know that you're like on the right path. Yeah.
Aw, that's beautiful. And what is your favorite score to work together on so far? It's probably not written yet, but you know,
Love
from the
that.
past.
Oh, it's the best is yet to come.
Well, we really had a great time on the Minions film that just came out. That was really nice. I was just so thrilled. The orchestra sounded so fantastic. It's just, and when we were recording, you know, like sometimes you just get those days where they're just all present. Like every single player was just like had like the right amount of coffee and they were just, it was just perfect. So like as we were recording, I just kept going like, am I hearing this correctly? Like, wait, how many players did we get? Like, this sounds huge. Like, how does this sound so huge? It just sounded amazing. And I think that was such an amazing experience for both of us because I don't know if we've always done this, but we recorded together in your studio. That may have been the first time we had done that.
Yeah, that was really fun.
We recorded together in her studio and then we kind of just jumped into mixing straight afterwards. And yeah, I think that's kind of been my favorite experience just because, you know, when you start from a really centered, great place like that, when your orchestra is just singing, you're like, okay, this mix is going to be fun. And it was, you know, we had a really good time.
And that was winds, brass, and strings together.
Yeah.
And they really, I mean, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes, I mean, whatever, historically brass can sometimes be, depending on, you know, day, it's like, you know, and sometimes you don't want all that stuff married together, but it was fantastic.
Stripe. I didn't stripe. Like I'm a fan, and like I really am. I know it's a scary thing to say, but I'm a fan of recording everything together, like the way a proper orchestra plays, if you can. I understand the value in doing winds and strings separate and brass separate and percussion separate. I totally get that. And I think, again, if the project requires that, it's a smart move. But there are some things, you know, especially like I'm a pretty lyrical writer. I feel like I'm a melodist. Like I really kind of just gravitate there naturally. And so I think think it's just familiar to me. Like I just like hearing them all play it together at once so that I know that what I've written is actually working. And so it's not piecemealed the way it feels when you're kind of doing one pass of these guys and then these guys, you guys go to lunch. Okay, brass come in at 4 p.m. It's just like, it kind of, again, I understand why it's valuable in certain cases, but it does take some of the magic away from it, you know, from the process. It just, when all
Takes
is
a lot
said and
more of
done,
this, you know?
yeah, like the finesse.
Like
yeah.
the, oh, who's there? Who's coming in? Who's coming in? All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
And what was like a funny memory from dubbing or mixing or recording together? Like, is there anything crazy you can share
oh
with us?
God, I have one. I don't know if it's funny, but we can laugh now. I was printing stems for Cinderella, speaking of reverbs, I used an Abbey Road plate on nearly everything. And I love the Abbey Road plates, but I had the analog button on. So, you know, word up, everybody. When you're printing your stems, be careful. I had the analog button on, and every stem I sent to Eva had some like noise floor, some hiss going on. And we spent days trying to figure out what the heck it was. And frankly, it was just the analog button on this reverb plate. So it wasn't funny at the time. It's very funny now because I'll never make that mistake again. And I'm very cautious. I'm more confident now than I was back then. But I do, when I'm starting to stem out things for you, I'll stem one cue out and I'll say, can you please listen? Let me know how it's sounding before I send you the, the 55 minutes left, that I have to kind of get through. So that's kind of a ha-ha story. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I mean, one story, there's not like one thing that particularly stands out to me. I think like any fun memory is like anytime we were talking about earlier where we're like unlock the situation, or when we like get to do something like a bit ballsy or different. Like for example, like I think one of my favorite projects today was like the last movie we worked on. So I feel like every movie we say is different, yeah, but it's like they're developing, she's getting different kind of gigs now where they're developing in a different way, where there's like budgets for orchestra or they're hybrid, and stuff that's really fun is to just like go bold with it. I love mixing aggressively, so it's like when I get like a go aggressive situation, like, and you can really tell the difference when I'm mixing aggressively versus when I'm not mixing aggressively. She can very much tell. She'll like sit and listen and be like, no, just, and I'll be like, okay. And then
you're fun.
Yeah. And then I'll really like go in, and it's like, panning stuff around the room and making it like fly around. Like that kind of stuff is always so fun. And yeah, as far as funny, like I said, fun moments too have been like when we like are just like hanging out and like take breaks and I don't know,
or
just
having perspective on things. Like something that seems hilarious now is when we were mixing the Minions film, we mixed at remote control in Alan's room, in Alan Meyerson's room, and I had just had a baby, so I brought my honestly, he must have been like 3 weeks old, maybe a month old.
This big still.
He was tiny, and like I had these little headphones on him, and he's, they're amazing at that age because you can just plop them in and, give them milk and they kind of sleep most of the day. But I mean, in hindsight now, it's like, oh my God, what a nutcase. Like, I can't believe I did that, but it's part of the job. It's part of the job, but that was funny. And, and we bumped into a lot of our friends that was control, and they were like, oh my God, Jess, like, he's fresh. I was like,
he was like, dude, when did you give birth? Yeah. He was that little, and these headphones were like the size of his head. It was like this massive. Yeah. I have great pictures, but his head is like this big.
I know.
And then the headphones were this big on his head. And he was just sleeping. Like, I guess he couldn't hear a thing. And here we're just like blasting, like, well, don't go too loud. Okay. He'd like shift and we'd be like, turn it down a little bit. So
but
funny.
That's a funny memory.
That's probably, that's a very, very funny. That's a
what
really
an assistant engineer. So cute. Oh, by the way, we have like 13 minutes left. So I will start reading the questions from the chat. But one last thing before I switch to those. Okay, Eva, this one is for you. What do Jess's revision requests to you look like? Like, can you tell us Be honest, like she's not sitting there.
Start over. No, I'm kidding. They don't sound like
Let's see. Lots of reverb comments here and there. Reverb's too long, less reverb. I'm a reverb person. I love reverbs. I am always getting told to turn reverbs down, especially on orchestra, because for me that always equals width. It's big. So now I always think it makes it sound like it's in a big room, which it usually does. But when people are like, yo, this wasn't recorded in a room that big, I take it down. So that's a lot of that's sometimes a comment. Just frequency things a lot too, just like resonance, which I'm pretty good at catching, but sometimes there's something that she would, like I said, sometimes our opinions differ. So it's like sometimes she's going, oh, this needs to be taken down. It's something that I would do the opposite of. Brass, it's either too loud or too quiet. And I'm like, I was thinking that. And then she'll go, why didn't you do it? I'm like, well, because last time I turned it up, I was told to turn it down. Because I tend to like smash brass and make it really loud.
And look, I think that's amazing if you're like mixing The Dark Knight. I think like, I think brass should be as ballsy as humanly possible. But I think like when it's Cinderella, like maybe it doesn't need to be like at 60 dB.
Yeah.
But no, but hopefully I'm not too terrible.
No, it's not too bad. And we do a lot of volume things too.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. It's like, do you think that cymbal's too loud? And I'm like, I don't know. That's how you wrote.
But I learned so much from you because you know your own tendencies. Like I'm a bit fearful of low end for whatever reason. Like I have a bit of an aversion to low end. It's just so I lean on Eva to be like, hey, I know this needs more like bottom ends. Like, what do you think? Where should this go? So
yeah, I get the muddy comments a lot, and sometimes I do have to fight that, because the thing I try to tell her is that like it does sound, sometimes fullness can be mistaken for muddy, especially like when we've worked in Alan's room. Now in my room, we work in my room, and it's like the thing about like a dub stage is that it translates, and you don't really want like all the sound effects and these low booms and these LFEs to be hitting, and then the music all to be. We have to be careful. That's why we listen with dialogue. I have to be very careful sometimes of making things too bright or making things too, saturated or whatever. Just because you don't want the whole movie to be going like, low end down here, and then the music to be kind of sitting here or here. So I often encourage those like kind of low end frequencies. So now the score, especially with orchestra, so the score is kind of wrapping and sitting in those frequencies with it, and then also carrying through the whole spectrum. So yeah, we fought a couple times on that. She'll listen at home, and oftentimes when studios are treated, you'll have a lot of low end. It'll be kind of boomy at home, where versus like in studios, usually that low end's treated a bit better. So sometimes I kind of have to push that, because people will go, oh, it sounds so different here. I'm like, well, yes, because we tend to work on very expensive speakers, but we also always say we do phone tests.
Yeah,
we do all kinds of tests to make sure that like we can come to some sort of agreement on where we're going to be sitting in that frequency.
I mean, that's like listening on your computer and your phone. Like that is my like biggest note to anybody who's ever mixed anything. It's like, this is the way most people listen now. So like if it's translating on your phone and on your computer, then you're in a healthy place.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, it's hard, right? Because what does that mean in a theater on a dub? Like, I think there's a healthy balance, but I always check on those two devices.
Yes. I mean, if you've seen the latest Dune movie, the low end is just like it's like that's what you have to compete against.
Yeah.
You have to compete against a freaking sandworm, the loudest sound effects. So it's like the score gets mixed really like you're hearing that low, you're hearing those basses, you're hearing everything like that. So there's a lot of movies like that.
Yeah.
Sound effects, especially these days, it's like, God, you watch a scene, you're like, we get it, like we understand. Like we have to keep that sound going throughout the whole action scene. So it's like we have to push the low end to kind of match that kind of stuff.
And again, like I know we've mentioned this before, but like sound effects people are equally as passionate about what they're doing as we are in the music department. I mean, speaking of Dune too, I love this guy, Mark, what's his name? Mangini, I forget his last name. He's a huge sound effects guy. And I worked with him once on a film, and for Dune 2, he got that sandworm sound by putting a microphone down his own throat and just like gargling. Like that's how he created the sound. So, you know, as specific and detail oriented as we are as musicians and composers and what we do, like that's their passion and their love and they do it. So yeah, I mean, I just think I understand what the competition is about because yeah, they're as driven as we are in that respect.
Yeah. So I fight her on that.
So
I fight her on that.
Don't fight. So we have two questions from Kristen. I'll read the first one. This one is for Eva. I love that you have been involved in both projects with those in the Recording Academy with Sarah and Kit, but then also in the film industry with Jessica. How did you get into both rooms and what did your journey look like until this moment as a mixer producer? Oh, we have more. Sorry. First this one. And then also, Kristen, do you want to read the next ones? I don't have to read the one reading. Awesome. Okay, let's go with this first one and then Kristen will take over.
Okay, right. Sorry. Sorry, I didn't quite hear the first part. Did you say the kit? The kit situation?
Yeah, the project with Star and Kit. So like it's very different than your work in film industry. How did you get into both rooms and what did your journey look like until this moment as a mixer producer?
Right. So my journey has kind of been all over the map. So I started as in a pop studio when I was very young. Gravitated towards an indie rock studio where I met her because I wanted to do a bit more. You know, I like sitting in a pop studio would drive me crazy. I just can't do it. I can't sit and press record over and over again. It's just not my tea. It's some people's tea. It's not mine. So then went on to indie rock and then I kind of went freelance from there and I got roped into the film stuff because a friend Forrest of mine who I met at King Size asked me if I knew Pro Tools and I said yes. And at the time I didn't. I thought I did and I didn't, not compared to what we do here now. So that is kind of how I was in records before. You know, I've worked at a lot of record studios. I've worked, you know, tracking, doing that kind of stuff. So then I kind of started, you know, going into the film stuff as well. And, you know, the Grammy happened because I worked with Jeff and Star, parody or parody on a score. And then their friend Kit, they were working on this album with Kit, which was actually very orchestral, you know, it's an orchestral album, it's classical compendium. So they recorded that at Abbey Road. And so they were like, hey, you know, could you mix this? And I said, yeah, you know what, sure, fine. So I did that. And then boom, it won a Grammy, which I was like, wait, what? I was like, wait, we're trying to get a Grammy for this? All right, let's go. So that's kind of how I've ended up. And I still do projects in that kind of stuff. Like I do like a few music. I just mixed like a country pop song last week, you know, and I mixed a bluegrass album I produced, you know, a month ago. So I still like doing that kind of stuff, you know. I prefer film though. I really latched onto film because for me, orchestral and this kind of stuff is very like therapeutic. It's also very much like a niche kind of, you have to be very, you know, it's not just like putting up drums, smashing a song, which happens a lot these days, not all the time, but it's pretty like standard every time, which scores aren't standard every time, but at the same time, you have to move very fast. So that's why I like working on them too, because it's kind of like go, go, go. You know, you don't have an artist sitting there. You know, the artist isn't dictating and the composer isn't either, the director is, and a huge schedule is. So we get to just keep moving. So that's kind of how I've kept my feet in both. I'll deal with the artist situation. You know, I don't want to say it's not my favorite because I don't want to offend anybody that I work with or worked with. But I tend to now lean more towards the score kind of stuff. Yeah.
We have 4 more minutes left and 2 questions. Let's go, Kristen.
Okay, I was just wondering how you both got into the remote control camp as well. I was just always curious about origin, you know.
You got tell your story. You got 4 minutes.
I got 2.
You got 2.
I lived in the UK for a while in London, and I worked at a post-production studio called Delane Lee, which is now Warner Brothers. And you know, I'd worked for a composer for a couple of years in New York City, and then I said I'm packing my bags and I want to like go somewhere new. And I'm a half Brit. My mom's a Brit. It felt comfortable, so I went over there and I took a couple steps back in terms of maybe where I was moving in my career. And I served coffee and I plugged in patch bays and I was like, I just want a new experience. I want to meet new people. And lo and behold, I was there for 3 months. And then Hans Zimmer and Bob Badamy and his whole team came in to mix Sherlock Holmes 2. they were dubbing it there. And I got to know the whole remote control team. This is kind of like this is such a crazy story. And I got to know them, and then I was like, hi, bye, see you later. And then I got an email from Bob, who was Hans's mixer for a music editor rather, for a very long time. And he said, are you interested in coming to California and working at Remote Control? And so the rest is really history. And I didn't even think twice. I was like, this is like the most amazing opportunity I'll ever have. And so I packed my bags up like Christmas Eve with, by the way, I didn't have a contract. This is like for any young person who's like, how do I do it? How do I get into this business? It's like, just say yes at the beginning, just like say yes. And I had no contract. I packed my bags. I like booked a plane to LA. I stayed at the Hotel California in Santa Monica for like 3 weeks until I found an apartment. And I didn't drive because I'm a New Yorker. So I had to learn how to drive in LA. So that's my long-winded story, but that's how I got into the remote control camp. And I was mainly a music editor there for 2 years. So yeah.
Yeah, like I mentioned, my friend Forrest, who was Alan Meyerson's assistant, I met him at a different studio. And then Alan went on to mix Dunkirk, and Forrest went on to mix the rest of Wonder Woman. So I went to assist Forrest on the rest of Wonder Woman. And I was freelance. So they kind of then kept calling me for things. So I did some score editing. I went out on tour as a woodwind tech because I play woodwinds. And then actually, when I landed back from that tour out with Hans Zimmer Live, I got a call from Forrest going, hey, do you want to assist Alan Meyerson? And I was like, number one, respected Alan because he's one of these very respected mixers in our industry. But I was like, I've already done studio management. I've already been out here for like 7 years. But as she said, it's like, just say yes. Because I was like, okay, listen, like I'm already here. Like, let's just do it. Fine. Let's see how it goes. So I started that. And then, yeah, just ever since then, I've been freelance. I go back there and still work to this day. I've gone out, done playback for Hans on tour, gone to London. Yeah, it was honestly the best. It was, it was life changing. And for me, it's also been great because I'm freelance. So I kind of get to step in. I kind of get to step out. If I want to step in, I go, hey guys, let me step in. And you can usually get like a bone, thrown at me. Well, here we go. And I'm always like, all right, let's go. So it's been really fun. So that's kind of how I got in the fold. And then over the years, like my relationship with Hans and Alan has just kind of, accelerated. So I've gotten to do a lot of cool different projects and travel a lot of really cool different places with him, etc. So
the first session I ever went to in Los Angeles when I came here, Alan took me to see a recording of Herb Alpert at Sony. And they were recording Lonely Bull, and I still have the sheet music to it. Like that was my first introduction in Los Angeles. Yeah, Alan Meyerson's the best. Props to Alan. He tried to get me to become a mixer, and I was like, no, how am I do it? It's not my passion. But now I kind of wish I had. Anyway.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that you've shared. We've learned so much, and it was so inspiring to hear all your beautiful stories of how you came together and how much fun you had on Minions. And we're sadly out of time, and in order to be respectful for everybody's time, we're gonna stop it here. But thank you so much for joining us. And we can't wait to see you on another Insight session, hopefully soon.